Alrighty guys, come with me for a weekend of celebrating Mom's birthday and seeing the Pope's Exorcist. First off, I gotta go to the gym. This is the fit today. Haven't worn this top in a really long time because it tends to be a little finicky, but you know what? We got it today. So let's go. Now, when it comes to horror movies, ghost movies are absolutely my favorite. I have always really enjoyed them just because other movies where it's like a slasher or there's like a werewolf, I don't know, it just seems a little too goofy, too cartoonish. Like if the killer's a real person, how could you not defeat him in some capacity? It just doesn't make any sense. But ghosts are always really hard to get rid of, and that's why I really enjoy watching how characters try to do that. Especially because they can mess with your perception in movies most of the times, like an Oculus. So when I saw the trailer for The Pope's Exorcist, I knew I had to go see it. I mean, it's Catholic horror. How cool is that? But before I went, it was time to write up an Interview with the Gods episode, our 50th episode, and then do a little bit more work before we headed off to Mom's. And it is time.
Oh, lady.
We went to the movies first, and then I had all kinds of cake and pizza, which I didn't show the cake. It was a really cool cake. But yeah, it was a pretty good birthday.
Roman.
I'm not magnificent enough for that camera.
Yay, family, yay!
Overall, a really solid day, and I'm glad we all got to spend it together. And I got Mom that little Aries plush as well.
So right off the bat, that movie, The Pope's Exorcist, was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I can't stand how so many horror movies just don't have the kind of like old school Exorcist flair anymore. Like, where did it go? Where did it go? A lot of times you see ghost movies where, like, first of all, barely anything happens. There's maybe like a cabinet bumps and people get scared, and then the way the problem gets resolved is like they just leave the house. How boring. How absolutely boring. No, The Pope's Exorcist was some classic, and I do mean classic, super campy, like Catholic-based horror. It was just amazing. But let's get a little bit deeper into it. So I'm not going to spoil the story for anybody, but if you know the basic structure of an Exorcist story, you kind of already know how it goes. We all already know how these kinds of movies start and end. But what's interesting is that it does follow the manuscripts and I guess the books and the stories of someone who actually was alive, Gabriel Amorth, the chief exorcist of the Vatican. And so some things that were accurate in the movie is that, yeah, he was a resistance fighter in World War II, which is very cool, and he actually founded the International Association of Exorcists, and he was there until he retired in, the year 2000. He died in 2016. But he, I guess, has some books, too, he wrote some memoirs, and that's, again, what this movie was based off, but he did a lot of exorcisms. He did a lot of stuff. And in the movie, they definitely portray him as someone who was more interested in trying to, get real exorcisms. So, he's not interested in cases where he discerns are clearly just a case of mental illness or physical illness or something else like that, which I think is something that needs to be talked about. A lot of times, these people exorcising people, I don't know if you've seen some of the wonky ridiculousness on TikTok, like this one here, where they're exorcising a Harry Potter spirit out of someone, and you can see she's giggling because what they're doing is stupid. Had they maybe taken, Father Gabriel's stance here, where they maybe, try medical avenues first, or just take a step back and realize that Harry Potter's not going to cause a demon infestation, they probably would have not looked so stupid online. So a couple of things I will talk about from the movie is actually kind of some of the way that exorcisms work. And actually, what's really interesting is the very first scene of the movie is this dude who's kind of possessed, and they bring in a pig, right? And it gives very much Bloodborne vibes. This whole movie was very Bloodborne vibes, which is exactly what you wanted from a Catholic Gothic horror, yes. But there is actually precedence, right, for this thing that he does, even if he describes it later as primitive psychology. In the Bible, right, when Jesus casts some demons out of this guy, Legion, right, he casts Legion out of this guy, which is just a bunch of demons, he puts them into a bunch of pigs, and those pigs run off the cliff and die. So in the first frame of the movie, it's really cool that we kind of see this direct parallel where they exorcise this demon out of this guy into this pig, right, allegedly, and then they just kind of kill the pig, exorcism's over. even if it was just a questionable case, right, where a Morth is like, I don't think that was real, this is just a little trick to get him to stop believing this. That does have precedence in the Bible, so that is still fun. It is still fun to me, and this is kind of what witchcraft is, if you really think about it. Witchcraft isn't just, you know, actual magic. A lot of times, witchcraft is also these sleight of hand, these tricks to get people out of their own mindset, because placebo is a powerful thing, and sometimes witchcraft is breaking that magic of placebo. You see this a lot in Slovenia, which is right next door to Italy, okay? In Slovenia, they had the concept of an unwitcher, which is a lot like the Witcher series, right? It's very much like the Witcher, in that what they would do is someone would say, I've been bewitched because my chickens keep dying and my crops keep failing and all these other things. Someone has put a curse on me. And they would go to this unwitcher, who would then hear the story, and they would get different points of view, right? They would talk to this person's children, their husband, and so on and so forth. And maybe their husband and children would tell something like, yeah, she's really rough with the chickens, like, really unnecessarily injures them a bit. Yeah, she doesn't really take care of the field, kind of doesn't water the crops regularly. And the unwitcher would hear this and go, yep, there's definitely a curse here. And then they would go to the person's house, they would find something on the property, like a broken egg or a bone buried on the property, which if you had dogs or chickens, you would find. And they would say, yep, this is proof that you've been cursed, and now bibbidi bobbidi boop, I've undone the curse, congratulations. Have your daughter take care of the chickens and make sure you're watering your field. But that was it, right? And then the curse was broken and the magic was gone. And this was actually really important for, like, small rural communities especially. Ones that didn't have access maybe to a church all the time, or priests like that, or just didn't want someone to get hurt. They would go to the unwitcher, right? Because in Slovenia, they absolutely did do witch trials. And people did die of witch trials. So this was kind of a way to keep the peace in a community and not cause a big ruckus like we've seen Christians do with witch trials throughout the history of Europe and America, right? It was a lot of social play, it was a lot of social order, and it was a way to keep things peaceful and diffuse tension. That was a lot of what magic was in the old days. And that's what happens here in the first scene of this movie, too. Another thing I loved about this movie that I'm sure you'll guess, because I've already talked about it a little bit, is the aesthetic of it overall, and the design choices that they made throughout. I mean, again, if you love Bloodborne and you love that grungy, dark, gothic horror with that Catholic aesthetic, you will love this movie. Absolutely, like 10 out of 10. Aesthetics are perfect. But my favorite thing is that as we're going through the Vatican, you can see that, like, you know, we have this library full of monks running around, and they've got these little black wizard hoods on. I know someone's gonna say, they're not wizards, those are monks. Shut up. Look at his little hat. That's a wizard. There is so many times the little dude in the wizard hat pops up. It's so funny to me because people will say, there's no magic here, there's no this and that. Meanwhile, the entire Catholic Church is so steeped in old school magic, and this is kind of one of the lines that even the Pope talks about, where the younger generation doesn't believe the devil actually exists. It's just more of a philosophical concept for them, or an ideology. Meanwhile, the old school exorcists are like, no, they're real, and you gotta use the special talismans and the prayers and the special this and that, and you gotta use, like, the hardcore spiritual magical elements of the faith to get rid of a spiritual magical being. The Catholic Church is and forever will be a fantastic example of how magic and religion were intertwined always, right? Because you really can't operate a religion without magic. Religion is not something based in logic, science, ration, thought. Like, it's not something you can prove. It's not something that is concrete and substantial. That's why, like, a lot of people who, you know, prefer to go by these methods, right, by logic, ration, and reasoning, who would, you know, try to do a scientific proof of it, they're gonna say, yeah, no, religion's full of shit. And you know what? As someone who is religious, yeah, it's not really something you can prove. It's not something that even you should try to prove. That's the point of faith. But obviously that means that anyone who doesn't have any proof or reason to believe in it is just not going to believe in it. The end. it's when religious people try to apply ration and that kind of stuff to their religion that we get a bunch of stupid shit, like trying to prove that creationism is real, and trying to prove that we have direct line from Adam to whoever the fuck, and trying to prove all of these other things that you simply cannot prove because a lot of it's just mythology. Like, it's not, like, as a religious person, it's not fucking real. It didn't actually happen. Adam and Eve in the garden didn't actually happen. It's a myth. It's creationism. It's a Genesis myth. That's the point. A lot of Christians could benefit from realizing that their religion is not provable, not really factual, and not, real stories that happen. Like, a lot of it is mythology. There are things that did happen, of course. Like, there is a lot of actual history intertwined with this myth. But to say wholesale that every single thing in the Bible actually happened is just delusion. I'm sorry. Like, as a religious person, that is delusion. When it comes to the Pope's Exorcist, though, it's really, really cool how they make that distinction, because it really, to me, it signifies the divide between, like, really old school religion, where that magic was still apparent, and there were very much outside forces that they were considering and contending with, and this kind of, newer understanding of religion, where it's all just kind of philosophical, inner concepts. Both are still relevant. There is a lot of relevance to the idea that a lot of these things are just, like, philosophical, meditative concepts, but oh my god. Gunslinging with demons is still really, really fun, and there's no one that can tell me otherwise. So when it comes to aesthetics and general, like, theological fun, 10 out of 10. This movie, of course it does it. It's Catholic exorcism. You know it does it. Where we start losing it a little, though, is once again in, like, the kind of story. Again, I'm not going to spoil it, but the way they took the story, it was interesting. I liked what they did with one serious historical event. It was a fun way to kind of retcon what happened there. Does it shave a lot of responsibility off of the situation? Yes. Which is not good. But it's still a fun little way to try and explain that now that we can look back in hindsight and say, ooh, yeah, that was messed up. But my problem really with this movie, in terms of, like, actual demonology, where I give it, like, a 7 out of 10, is the big bad demon that they chose for this. So, like, you'll see different movies, different ghost movies throughout time. Another one that was really good was Hereditary. I loved Hereditary. Their big bad demon was King Payman. In this movie, the big bad demon, again, if you haven't seen the movie, I really suggest you see it. I don't want to spoil it, but they definitely could have chosen a different demon. Like, the choice they made here had me quite confusion, because if you actually read anything about this demon in the Bible, the amount of drama we needed to get rid of him really wasn't necessary. Like, nor would he be the one to kind of be pulling these kind of antics to begin with. And one thing about demonology, which is really interesting, that I don't think the Catholic Church even understands, is that demons aren't really interested in possessing people. They genuinely, truly are not. Like, the fallen angels have other things to do. What is interested in screwing with you, though, are the actual lower level demons. Like, tiny little spirits, basically, that just exist to screw things up. And they can prey on things like fear and anxiety. They can prey on things like low self-esteem or guilt or all these things. But that's just kind of what they do, right? They're there to test you a little bit, and they're there to screw with you. They're really not that much of a problem to get rid of. Like, again, think of like a wolf, right? We wouldn't blame the wolf for, like, eating your ass off. That's just what they do. That doesn't mean you're gonna, go out in the middle of a wolf pen and go play with them. You know what I'm saying? That's just how they are, and I really don't think anyone should hold it against them. It just means that when they pop up, you gotta do the basic wolf deterrent tactics, right? Like, back to back, yell and freak out and fire, scare them away, that kind of stuff. They're just little guys. They're just trying to screw you up a little bit. It's really not that big of a deal. So I would love to talk to, like, a Catholic priest who is well versed in exorcism and demonology to understand what the hell they actually think about demons, because as someone who's spoken to several of these great demon kings and princes myself, they simply could not be bothered. Like, they really couldn't be bothered, which is why I'm like, why are you always blaming it on these big guys and not, like, some little shit? Like when it says, I don't know, Belial has 50 legions of demons in his command, one legion is like dozens and dozens and dozens of demons. So 50 times that number that makes up like a Roman legion, think about. That's a lot. And these little shit demons are the ones that they're talking about. These little tiny, just kind of living to mess with you demons. The more you're afraid of them, the more they're gonna get just hyped up on it. It's a simple equation. So when it comes to demonology in this movie, again, 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. But the aesthetic, 10 out of 10. The actual story itself, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. I'll give it a 9 out of 10. I felt that it was well paced. I felt that the characters themselves were really nice. Some of the acting I'll give like a 7 out of 10 because there were a couple actors that were really meh, but Russell Crowe carried that shit. I will say he carried the hell out of it. I think if you are not going here to see something that is like super refined, and like if you come in here knowing that you're gonna get a lot of theatrical nonsense and you're expecting a little bit of the goofiness on top of all the spook, you're gonna love this. So that's my thoughts on this.
So it is springtime and all my plants are coming back to life. I got my tarragon, my thyme, and my strawberries, and this little bit of oregano. I grew this from a seed like 2 years ago, and it's growing over here even though the original stump is right here. I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing, but it is growing. And I got this thing recently called the garden tower. This is definitely a TikTok made me buy it moment. But I saw this, and since I rent, I can't really just tear up all the yard any more than I already have to plant my herbs. So I figured this would be a great way to garden without using up a ton of space. I thought about putting it on the septic tank, but then like what if someone needs to get into that, you know? And then also, where am I gonna put my fire pit in the summer? So now instead of there, it's just a little bit further away over there. Kudos to Garden Tower Project for probably making the easiest to assemble piece of garden equipment I have ever used in my life. Granted, I did screw it up once, but we fixed it, so it's fine. This even has like a compost tower in the middle of it, so I can just dump a bunch of compost scraps in there and then put some worms in there, and as the plants are doing their thing, they can get basically just free fertilizer all the time. Which, to me, is pretty cool. Got some zip ties in there for stability, and then that's it. And once it comes more closer to what I'm going to plant, that's when I'm going to fill it with dirt, because I want as little possibility of cutworms as possible. Look at these chives, and look at all this merch that we now got on the shop. If you guys follow me on TikTok and you like my Baba Yaga friend, definitely grab you some. And I'll see you around next week for another blog and all the stuff I got going on.